One of the best symbolic pictures to imagine what the solar eclipse does to our lives spiritually and metaphored in the real life is like somebody came into your office, you have a bunch of stuff all over your desk. A lot of it's crap, but you also know where everything's at, even though one pile's crap, one pile's important stuff. And during the eclipse season portal, it's sort of like the universe comes in and just sideswipes your desk and everything's on the floor. And then in the time following the eclipse portal, that wrap up, that integration period, it's like we're going through everything that was launched off of the desk super aggressively. And we're kind of like, oh, well, this is trash. I probably should have thrown this away anyways. Oh, this is really important. I actually needed this document. Why was this just sitting superfluously on my desk? That's essentially what we're then doing with the themes and the energies that the solar eclipse tossed and turned in our lives over the last few weeks. This is the cosmological narrative for September the 27th and the 28th, both Saturday and Sunday. Since today's Friday, we're going to cover the weekend collectively, and we are coming off this incredibly difficult Martian week where we had Mars squaring Pluto. We essentially finished that eclipse portal. We got squeezed. We didn't really want to be in that position anymore. So then Mars moves into Scorpio, which then starts having us side-eyeing everything, trying to gain control, trying to root out what is not fundamentally working in the scorpionic area of our chart so we can avoid both the spiritual and physical situations that the eclipse brought us. And now, over the weekend, we're going to have some interesting transits that not only harken us back to the Aries solar eclipse that we had earlier this year, and in a couple of my past videos I've referred to it as the Aries solar eclipse in April. That was my mistake. It was technically March 29th. I just for some reason thought that it was April in my own timeline. But we're going to have a throwback to some of those themes over this weekend, and we're also seeing the advancing of the Martian theme in our life, which is currently looking at what does work, looking at what doesn't work, and putting things back into order where they need to be so that we can create some sense of control and some sense of territorialness over what we call ours. Now, before we get into it, I'm Michael the Hierophant. I'm a mystic and magi, and I invite you to join me every single Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific for my astrological and divination-based spiritual workshop, Consciousness, Conjunctions, and Conversations. We get together on Zoom, and you can sign up for your seat in the Zoom at the evergreen link in my bio, which is a link tree, and we go through the last week's transits and discuss personal and anecdotal community stories to make astrology a little bit more bite-sized. We're dealing with all types of symbols, archetypes, and general vague ideas of things. And sometimes when you're just referring to planets or aspects in their general buzzwords, things that you hear on TikTok, read in articles, you're very much glossing over some of the depth, well, actually a lot of the depth that astrology has to it. Astrology is an incredibly deep subject. And that's why we find so many correspondences with different planets and different energies. We also go through the next week's transits, and I teach you how to delineate where these movements, where these aspects are showing up in your personal life as well as your spiritual narrative, so to help you make better sense out of the highs and lows in life and help integrate this spiritual journey that we are all on. As we adventure through this dark forest that we call life, even if we've been incarnate a million times before, we can't always walk in the same footsteps that we left for ourselves, and as we are trying to find our fixed destination, a place where we want to end in this life, there's no better compass, no better map than the stars above, which are always a direct reflection of what's happening in our internal landscapes and our spiritual journeys. So I encourage you to join me at my class. You can check out the link in my bio. It's completely free, and I look forward to seeing you there. Now let's dive back into the cosmological narrative for September 27th and the 28th, which is the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. So one of the big things that we're going to focus on in this video is the fact that Jupiter, which has been moving through Cancer, and if you don't follow my videos and you aren't familiar with the spiritual quest that Jupiter has put forward for all of us while he has been swimming exalted in Cancer, Jupiter is showing us both through wisdom gained, experience and knowledge gained, and so therefore wisdom gained, he is showing us how to nurture ourselves, specifically how to mother ourselves better in the Cancerian area of our chart, because that's the prescription of action for wherever Cancer lies in our chart. This is where we need to mother ourselves, where we need to show up and basically be our own parent and remind ourselves to nurture. So Jupiter is going to advocate and create both scenarios and knowledge gained experiences for us to learn. How do I nurture myself better? Is it because I'm giving too much, not giving enough? How do I need to show up for myself? Maybe it's responsibility, accountability. The journey's going to be different for everybody, but that's what Jupiter has been doing in Cancer. Now, Jupiter on the 27th is going to hit the 22-degree mark of Cancer. And this 22-degree mark of Cancer is important and karmic because this 22 degrees is where Mars stationed during the Aries solar eclipse that we had March 29th of 2025. So essentially, with Mars being the ruler of this Aryan solar eclipse, wherever Mars was, whatever actions and aspects or degrees that it hit during key moments of the eclipse will then be thematic insights into the culmination, the fruition of that eclipse. Now, with Jupiter being at 22 degrees of Cancer, which was where Mars was sitting during the solar eclipse, and Jupiter has been showing us and expanding, again, giving experiences and wisdom gained, like opportunities for us to grow, for us to self-nurture, for us to become more regal versions of ourselves. Jupiter is going to touch a similar theme that probably surrounds the Aries solar eclipse. So I want you to go back and I want you to see whether it was intentions you set or just thematic undertones of what was happening or what the Aries solar eclipse was for you. I guarantee you that over the weekend, Jupiter is going to be reminding you that there's some element of yourself that you need to show up and nurture and mother in order to come and see a fruition of that Aries solar eclipse. Because remember, eclipses are not isolated events. They don't happen in a vacuum, and we don't see the culmination of these eclipses for a very long time. Eclipses have to do with the nodes of the moon, and the nodes of the moon move in 9 and 18-year cycles. So arguably, the Aries solar eclipse that we had earlier this year, we're going to see themes of the Aries solar eclipse playing out for arguably the next 9 to 18 years, if not indefinably the next year to year and a half still. So we are still growing that new egoic version of ourself that was born in the Aryan section of our chart, and Jupiter is giving us a little nudge, a little reminder this weekend. And this is probably not going to be a day-breaking moment. This isn't going to be like, wow, I wonder what's happening in the astrology today that's bringing me back to the solar eclipse in Aries. This is probably more so for people that track astrology, if you do a lot of journaling, if you're very introspective, reflective, and interoceptive with your own emotional body, you're probably going to sense this, or you'll at least be able to see the events of the day and look back and see the direct connection. Now, what's happening at the same time that Jupiter is at that 22-degree mark of Cancer is that the moon in Sagittarius will square Venus in Virgo. Now, remember, a square is of the nature of Mars, so we actually arguably have two different movements and happenings that are happening on the 27th that both indirectly involve Mars. We had the first one, which was Jupiter hitting the 22-degree mark, which was where Mars sat during the solar eclipse in Aries. Now we have a square, which is of the nature of Mars, and so whatever the outcome of a square between the moon in Sagittarius and Venus in Virgo is, it will be to the direct benefit of Mars, which is currently swimming in its domicile of Scorpio. So we're going to come back around to that in a minute, and we'll make sense. We'll connect the two together. But when the moon is in Sagittarius, it means our emotional body is craving some sort of freedom, some sort of philosophical introspection. Sagittarius, especially when the moon is in Sagittarius, regardless of if you're sensitive to emotions or not, you're going to feel a sense of wanting to break free of the current confines of your life. You're going to say, I don't want to go to work today. I wish I could go explore. I wish I could go for a hike. I wish I could just be free, be liberated. And so with the square with Venus in Virgo, it's like when Venus is in Virgo, Venus is in its fall, and Venus becomes obsessed with what's not working. So what do we think here? Well, Venus is aesthetics, it's harmony, it's the things that bring us pleasure. And so when Venus is transiting through Virgo, regardless of where it's at in your chart, oh my gosh, suddenly Venus is very fixated about, why am I not coming into the belonging or the acquiescence of these desires I have? The desire body is essentially, for the time that Venus moves through Virgo, the desire body is kind of in stasis, kind of in pause, because the fixation of the desire body becomes, why am I not achieving what I'm desiring? And so with the moon in Sagittarius squaring Venus in Virgo, and all of this on behalf of Mars, which is moving through Scorpio, we very much quickly come back to the scorpionic traits of Mars, which is swimming through Scorpio, looking at what doesn't work, specifically in the scorpionic area of our chart, but looking at what doesn't work, trying to rectify it, and trying to regain control over our life in that area of our life. However, this is all being stimulated by the fact that we have this split between our emotional body seeking freedom and liberation and our desire body noticing all the things that we are not doing in order to achieve our desires. And Jupiter probably plays into this because Jupiter is probably there to remind us that we need to put ourselves first. We need to self-nurture ourselves. Work can't always be the first thing. Money can't always be the first thing. Achievements can't always be the first thing. Sometimes we need to put ourselves first, and where we feel sensitive, whether that's like, I just need to self-care, I need to take a bath, I need to journal, I need to just not do any work today, I need to go for a walk, ground myself, take time for myself. And this is all further capitulated on the 28th when the moon in Sagittarius will quincux Jupiter in Cancer, bringing the moon and Jupiter directly into an interaction with each other. However, Jupiter rules Sagittarius, the moon rules Cancer, so these planets are in mutual reception with each other. So while a quincux is a push-pull where nobody wins, a quincux is essentially sitting in uncomfortable energy. Think of having moments of spiritual ick and just being told that that's your day today. That's how the energy is going to feel today. And that is the moon quincunxing Jupiter in Cancer. Again, our emotional body with it in Sagittarius is wanting to go be free, go explore, be liberated. Explore what has not been currently known in our lives, whether it's just a unfamiliar philosophical idea, or maybe it's literally going out and going for a hike, or exploring an area of town or an area of the world that you've never been in before. And so essentially we have this emotional desire to get the hell out of here, get out of where we are, the normal stasis of our life. But Jupiter is saying, well, don't forget, you don't want to burn yourself out. And so we're going to feel a tear between wanting to get out and experience the world, and also like, maybe I just need to sit inside and journal and read a book and reflect on what it is that I'm experiencing in my life right now. And this transit is further colored on the 28th by the fact that Mercury in Libra will quincux. Remember, quincux is the push-pull. It's the spiritual ick. It's the sitting in discomfort. The North Node in Pisces will quincux Mercury in Libra. And this is also interesting, and it probably adds to what our emotional body is feeling, because the North Node in Pisces wants us to surrender to the divine. It's surrender to chaos. It's surrender to the flow. It's literally jump in the river, and the river starts moving way faster than you were expected. That's okay. That's where you were going anyways. That's Pisces North Node energy. And when Mercury's in Libra, Mercury is very fixated because Mercury's very practical, and Libra is all about balancing. So Mercury, in its perfective, hyper-analytical personification, wants to make sure that the scales are balanced just even. If this one is 1, this one's 1. If this one's 2, this one's 2. But the North Node wants us to just dive into the river and say, I don't know what's going to happen, and Mercury's really obsessed with being overly practical. And so this could look like Mercury quincux the North Node could very much look like an inability to articulate where we're going on our spiritual journey, because the North Node is bringing us closer to that spiritual journey, but we're getting some sort of communication, or we're getting a desire to communicate in the Libran section of our chart that's far too practical and far too grounded in a lot of ways. Even though Libra's an air sign, we have to think about what Mercury's doing. Mercury's trying to make sense out of the formless. It's trying to take the formless and make it formed, but with the North Node in Pisces, the North Node in Pisces is saying, take your form and dissolve it and just become formless. So that makes a lot of sense why we have this energetic quincux and incompatibility between these two energies. We might know intuitively where we need to go in this life, but our own sense of perception, or perhaps communication, or something that comes through reminds us that, oh, well, we have to be careful to people please. We have to be careful to keep the scales even though our intuition is saying, essentially, F the scales, just jump in the river and let's do this thing. If you like these spiritual and astrological narratives, I encourage you to join me at my class every Wednesday at 6:30. We have a lot of fun there. And if I don't see you in class, I will see you on the next video. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will be back on Monday to talk about the cosmological narrative.